Hey guys, once finishing ENDER Magnolia and getting the platinum, here we are. So let's dive into the usual topics: story, gameplay, graphics and music. Before jumping into the video, the only thing worth mentioning is that inevitably I will make some comparisons between ENDER Lilies and this entry, but just to set a known standard. Without further ado, let's begin. ENDER Magnolia starts with a small cinematic where we can see some flashbacks talking about homonculi, which are seen close between humans and monsters, as some have run rampant. But a woman in white tells the person who's dreaming to not be afraid, seek allies and other attuners, closing with an incomplete phrase that maybe said, "You can save the homonculi." That's when a girl in black clothes awakes inside of something like a capsule, but she has no memories of what happened or who was that important person in the dream. However, her situation is quite unsettling, as everything around seems like barely holding together, so Lilac starts to look around this area. After traversing parts of this place, she finds a homunculus with a sword in its chest. Suddenly, this stabbed creature states that Lilac's eyes do not fear death, so she questions if she's frightened to see something like her. After exchanging some words, they pretty much scratch each other's back and agree to work together. That is how Lilac lends a hand to Nola, our first companion in this journey. Thanks to her strength, our heroine is able to move around this place and later escape, but down the line they find another homunculus in something like a scrapyard. Needless to say how this confrontation ends, so Lilac tunes our little fella where she sees some flashbacks. This is the prime way in which we are going to get parts of this whole story. Every time Lilac beats one of these special homunculi, she gets to see a fraction of their memory, similarly as the prequel. Fast forward several scenes later, we reach the lower stratums, or Land of Fumes, a gloomy place where they set as destiny the upper stratums, or that ominous green place above. To that end, Nola says that she won't let Lilac perish until they reach that area. It goes without saying that Lilac also wants to find who was that important person trying to save her before awakening at the bottom of that facility. And this is how their journey begins. If you ask me, do I have to play ENDER Lilies to get this story? My answer is yes, you have to, as there are plenty of topics that link both the stories in a certain way, and I believe it was more than obvious for that first scene. And well, I don't want to ruin some interesting plots as they do not share them until later. The deal is that in this game, the homunculi were used as workers for one thing or another, but of course, as in any other experiment, there is always that hunger to know more, and what other way to experiment if there's fresh flesh around. And yeah, that is all I want to tease in this game, because as you advance, check the environmental storytelling, different flashbacks, and lots of documents here and there. If you take the time to connect the dots between the stories, you will notice that it is extraordinary. When I finished this whole mess, I was like that meme where you have this dude looking at random places quite lonely. Yes, there are plenty of moments that can be quite sad. Maybe not as sad as what happened in ENDER Lilies, but gloomy ones nonetheless. Now in this case they will dive into this topic of the fumes, why they wanted to reach a particular place using the homunculi, and the aftermath. In all honesty, if I compare both the stories, I will say that I slightly liked ENDER Lilies a bit more, so I will give this entry a 9.5. I do recommend to take the time to check every area, every room, every document, as there are many details that tell a lot, and it is not a story that wants to keep everything as a surprise, since early it teases important topics and tells you where it is pointing. The intrigue starts to rise as you don't know the main actors of this journey, but you know what may be happening. That sets the plot. But now let's check its gameplay. ENDER Magnolia shares a quite short but really packed and beautiful journey, which will last for around 20 hours, enough time to get the platinum. This is a true Metroidvania. With that I mean solid RPG elements and plenty of non-linear exploration. So for this section I want to talk about the general level design, customization and bosses. Here since the beginning you will be running around exploring multiple areas with locked doors, blocked paths and much more. I will say that if you have that itch to explore in these kinds of games, you won't be disappointed, because this entry shares, let's say, one of the most important skills since early in the journey, as the famous double jump, which intrigued me, as oftentimes that is the main way to separate plenty of places. but don't particularly expect that from this entry. Here it's more about other field skills. If you want to be picky and selective, I don't think you will find something new under the sun. But in all honesty, it was more about the general platforming presented here. I really liked it. How the game since quite early opens the doors for you to explore different regions. Your destination is of course the upper stratum, but while you reach that area, you will go up, down and sideways. On this end, something I really loved is that the game automatically marks these doors, or things that do not let you move around, so you just have to keep a general mental map, which made the exploration quite smooth, as it was like, okay, this place didn't work with the right skill and double jump, so later I will come back. If I had to point a negative, I will say that the academy in one of the central stratums is the only place that felt perhaps a bit tedious, as you have to explore big areas that oftentimes have different puzzles as moving boxes, being teleported left and right, and whatnot. That is the only place that was a bit sour. Aside from that, the general level design was superb. What is cool about Ender Magnolia is that in comparison to Ender Lilies, here they refined the role-playing elements a bit more, so you can equip and change some more things, as accessories, care passes, totems and relics. Every piece of accessory can be crafted once you get the blueprints, so as you advance and of course search some areas, you will unlock those items with a smithy, and they don't ask you for outrageous amounts of materials, but in case you don't want to look around for materials, as you advance you will be able to find some interesting items, so you can get away with what you find. As for the new mechanics, while the parry was also seen in the previous entry, you needed to add a particular character. Here the same idea exists, but if you don't want to do that, it is always possible to equip a shield. They can increase your stats or they can be used as part of this parry system, and if you want to use another parry ally, yep, you can do it. Just be careful with your timing, as sometimes there is a small delay that may F you up. If you wonder, do I need to run both parry systems? That may depend. If you want to dive into the mechanics that this game offers, chances are that you want to increase the difficulty, which can be done at any moment, and one of the settings is related to the attack frequency. That is where it works the best, as some enemies can turn a bit relentless. In any case, you can also change your homonculi as you advance, where in comparison to Ender Lilies, here you need to find specific parts for your allies. That way you can unlock and upgrade their different attacks, so set them however you feel much more comfortable. There are a good number of moves available. As for the bosses, I will say that the very first ones aren't that challenging. Chances are that you may see 1 or 2 game overs while you get their moves, so no biggies. Later is where they turn quite interesting, so be careful. There are some that will hand your arse in a couple of moves if your defense isn't decent or if you neglect parries. On that front, the faster you learn those systems, you will have decent chances to get them in fewer tries. So at least in comparison to the previous entry, I felt that here they increased the general speed and motion a bit more. Chances are that you need to farm like 1 or 2 extra levels, while also upgrading your stuff. The cool thing is that plenty of times there are other areas to explore if you believe a particular boss is beating you too easy, so that is another option. And yep, the very last boss will beat the heck out of you. It is quite challenging, but really dynamic. With all of these details, in my humble opinion, there are interesting improvements in Ender Magnolia, so I want to give it a 10. The fact is that, while it is short, I enjoyed like 99% of the process here. Then again, some areas in the academy were the ones that felt frustrating, but aside from that, it was an amazing adventure that invites the player to explore different places. And most importantly, it isn't linear. You can dive into one area, then another, and keep progressing through the whole maze. In the graphics section I check glitches, the general art of the game and other visual things. I never experienced an issue with it getting close or any other thing in detriment of the gameplay. This game runs really smooth. Button that you press, action that it's executed. Then again, the only thing is that if you run with shields to parry and your ally which also parries, there is a small delay that you need to consider. Aside from that, it's like nice butter on bread. As for the general art of the game, I believe it's really beautiful. There's plenty of areas that tell small stories with little details left and right. So once again, I recommend to pay close attention to every room, or once you start to search for different items. Now, I don't want to particularly point them out, but it is similar as in Ender Lilies, where you will see that one and only room that has a portrait or peculiar flowers. Of course, there are some other areas that are like way too obvious, like hey, in case you didn't get what is happening, here, look at it, or something along those lines. So, I consider its general artistic execution superb. If I go picky with it, it's more about some enemy designs. Here you won't see as many grotesque creatures as in the prequel, where oftentimes they were abhorrent beasts. Here it's more like mechanical things, of course due to the main topic of the game. Sure, there are interesting surprises, but I can argue that it wasn't as impactful as in Ender Lilies, and some animations may need some extra polishing. Aside from that, I'm sure that most people will enjoy what they will see here, particularly some late areas. A detail that I loved so much is that here you will have the chance to unlock different pieces of art, since the most basic of enemies up to the general ideas, environments, and so on. This is something I gotta praise, as I consider it terrific, at least if you like to check these things. And few games show their ideas and sketchboards like this one. Games that came to my mind were Metroid Prime, After Image with its PDF, some is entries, also some Idea Factory games, but in all honesty, as someone who likes to check different pieces of art, this is something I appreciate a lot. For me, the graphics are 9. It has no technical issues, or at least I didn't get into them while playing, and it is filled with beautiful environments. And last but not least, its music. I would say that this game makes it a bit better for much more people, as it isn't as gloomy as Ender Lilies. In that game, most tracks were a gloomy piano with some rain or outright unsettling, as the very last area. While I loved it, yeah, I know they may not see it quite well. In any case, here it's more about interesting jazzy compositions that go quite well for the environment, considering that there is hope. I mean, you will see some civilians, unlike a barren FDAP region, so it makes sense that it isn't gloomy as heck. In my humble opinion, only 2 areas have that kind of gloomy vibe. Every other place it's more like soothing. Perhaps that is the detail that may turn off some people, but I consider them extraordinary. On that front, I liked some executions in this game much more, like some of the central stratums. There is a track that I'm sure most of you will simply love. And of course they have to throw some heavy contrast, with a couple of tracks reminiscent to a heartbeat and unnerving vibe. When I first heard them, they definitely gave me the chills, but those were beautiful details, but only if you sit for a moment just to listen to each track. My main complaint comes with the boss tracks, perhaps the only thing I didn't like that much. Few are the compositions I remember really well. In particular those that straight up go for something like metal, more like industrial symphonic metal, and something like neoclassic. Those were the things that for sure I am going to add to the collection. Aside from that, I don't know, I found them a bit lacking, but it doesn't mean they were bad, or something like that. They just didn't caught my attention that much as in Ender Lilies. As for the general sounds while attacking and things like that, I believe they were well executed. There is a rich variety of sounds, considering that you will hear explosions, chains, rockets, some organic sounds like kinda fleshy if that makes sense, and all of them are quite amazing. If you have a good audio to play the game, I'm sure you will enjoy the OST of this entry a lot. To me, it is a 9.5. If I reduce it a tiny bit, it's just because I remember more boss tracks from the prequel in comparison to this one. Ender Magnolia final score is a 9.5. I definitely recommend to play this game, as it is well balanced in every category. It was an extraordinary Metroidvania that I'm sure I will remember for a lot of time. Few are the things that I would like to see better polished, but in all honesty that is just if I go picky. Aside from that, extraordinary story, gameplay, beautiful art, and terrific soundtrack. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.